Wonderful. We have the beautiful man, Mr. Adam Kennedy, once again on the podcast. The last time we spoke about Friedrich Nietzsche and wonderful things about what he had. Many, many concepts. But today we are going to go towards a more non-dualistic side of things. And the essence behind it, or the core essence of it, is this time being. Now, we say in our day-to-day lives that I don't have time, like it's a fact. But today we are questioning this entire assumption from a deep philosophical standpoint. So for those who don't know, sir, what do you think being time means? For someone who has never heard of it, for someone who has not been exposed to any philosophies or non-dual teachings and things as such.
Yeah. Well, it's really good to be back with you, Jay. I have been engrossed in the work of Ehe Dogen Zenji now for the past 5 years, and he and I share a fascination with time. And so Dogen, writing in the 13th century, which completely boggles my mind, was beginning to understand that time as a concept is something that people don't fully understand. That people think they know what time is, but when they stop to really reflect on the nature of time, people draw a weird blank. They go, I don't really know what time is. Is it just clock time? And that's what people just assume, that, oh, this is just clock time, and this is what, how our world is constructed. However, Dogen took this idea and flipped it on its head and says that we're not in time, or time is not like a river that is flowing, that we are just in these moments. Rather, Dogen had the experience that we are time, and so that we are the very structure of time itself. And so Dogen wrote this fascicle that is one chapter in a large corpus of material that he calls the Shobo Genzo, and he wrote it over 20 years of his life, and it was his exploration of what the relationship of existence and time. So to answer your question, what is being time for Dogen Zenji? It is simply that for a human, time is all being, and being is all time. And so to take that idea and to unpack it will give you like a richer understanding of reality itself. So just to take that idea, Dogen calls a person of being time a time being, because there is an ontological unity to being and time. They are identical. So for Dogen, everything that exists is time, not in time, but it is time itself. And that has radical implications about how we view ourselves in relation to time. All right. So in my exploration of being time, which you can also say that being is synonymous with existence, right? And so Uji, which is the name of the fascicle, is translated as is two characters in Japanese. It's the U and the G, and that means being time, but it also means existence time, right? Because to be is to exist, right? And what we as sentient beings do is we exist in time, right? And normally what that signifies is this state of becoming, right? There is the now, the present moment, and
Yeah.
then there is differentiation. There is things that happen. There's change occurs, right? And so you have the being on the one hand, and then this time is tantamount to becoming, right?
Yes.
So it's how we view differentiation in the world. But Dogen, being the Dogen was the founder of the Soto Zen school of Buddhism. All right, so because he had this radical way of viewing reality itself that was so different than his predecessors in Japan, that there was a clash, right? And so Dogen had these very, very unique ideas, and he had this one burning question. And the burning question for Dogen in relation to Buddhism, which is his foundation, is if Buddha nature is already always ever present, we always have access to Buddha nature, then why do we need to practice? So in 13th century Japan, it was, you practice to attain enlightenment. You sit, you meditate, and then if you practice long enough, one day in the future, you will realize the way. You become enlightened. And Dogen never liked that idea. He said, if Buddha nature is always ever present, why do we have to practice? And so Dogen left Japan and went to China to study with the Buddhist monks in China, and he stayed there for 5 years. And after 5 years, he experienced what he terms Shinjin Datsuraku, which is the dropping away of body and mind. And when he experienced that, everything was right there. Right? He had this explosive realization that practice, right? The practicing like meditation or whatever it is you do to attain enlightenment, practice and realization were not separate things. They were one simultaneous event, right? Practice is realization. And so he realized this in a flash, right? And then he came back to Japan, not with a, what was it, all of these instructions, but simply that the eyes are vertical and the nose is horizontal, right? That what is in this present moment is realization.
Yes.
And the act of realizing in this moment is everything. So, and so he came back and started writing about time and existence, and that's what that's Dogen's foundation, right? Now, I know that I haven't actually answered your question, but that's how much of a brain scramble and a profound exploration of time and existence this whole thing actually is. So
Yes.
but that's a nice primer for what we're getting into anyway.
So it seems like what we recognize from this is it's not something that is separate from you. It is moving through you, and you're able to get to a point where you recognize that this is the awareness that you already are, right? With that Buddha nature that is already playing out, you're just recognizing. Would that kind of mean that, by the way, also, I don't know if you mentioned this word, but that word Satori comes to mind. Could you please shed some light on what that Satori means, and would that mean Buddha had that Satori, or was it a different word that could be used for that recognition? Is that what Dogen is talking about here?
So the word Satori is very interesting. Satori is a Japanese word, and it means sudden flash or glimpse of insight into the true nature of reality. And this is what his realization was a Satori, a flash of insight. There's a difference between Satori, traditional Japanese Satori, and, and what we would consider enlightenment. And that the Buddha, the original Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, achieved enlightenment. But for him, that means that there was no longer, he was no longer going to reincarnate. He was going to enter nirvana and then, be completely off the wheel of samsara, which is, the suffering and that whole thing. Satori's different in that it's in general parlance, Satori's a flash. It's where you have this brief glimpse that everything is interconnected, everything is completely what they call it is thus. Like this moment is completely this moment, and there is this moment is so full that it could not possibly be any other way. So what happens is physiologically you have this insight into the perfect nature of existence, and then there is this relaxation that occurs because you have if nothing can possibly be different and everything is completely perfect in this moment, everything is completely just so, right? It is just this moment, then there is nothing to strive for. There is nothing to gain. There's nothing that could possibly be different. And so you let go of this, a good way to put it is a self-contraction. You let go of this self-contraction and you just relax into the moment. And then, and there's this associated feeling of liberation that comes along with that, this freedom. And so the Satori is the initial, it's like a splinter, that gets wedged in your mind. You realize that, and realization is part of this, that you realize the truth of the nature of reality, that it's right here, right now, it's ever present. Now where Dogen is unique, and that's a normal, standard definition of Satori, it's a glimpse into the nature of reality. Dogen takes it a step further, and he says that, yes, everything is present in this moment, everything is perfectly thus in this moment, but and perfect in its being, right? But that also that existence is present right here and now, not just this moment, but all past and all future are also contained within this present moment. And that is a radical statement. So when I say the ontological unity of being and time, what I mean is that there is, and again, ontological, ontology is the study of being. It is the study of existence itself, which if you're a spiritual person, if you really want to dive down the rabbit hole, you're going to, dig on the nature of existence. You're always going to wonder what's underneath the veil. What is the spirit made of? What is time and existence, right? You're always going to ask those questions. And so Dogen was my brother in that regard, that he never stopped asking questions about the nature of time and existence. And to the point where he realized that time and existence are an integrated, interwoven fabric, right? There is no separation between time and existence. So when we think of our lives as a linear progression from birth to death, and I always like to think about this idea that if you look at a tombstone, you see the year of the birth, right, and the year of the death, and then and then that little dash in the middle. That dash represents the entirety of your life, right? But we always take that as the least important part, when we're looking at those dates as the beginning and the end. But Dogen didn't look at time as a linear progression, and therefore he didn't see life as a linear progression. He saw all time and all being as this unity, right? And so what that what that means. What that means for us as human beings is that, um, well, just kind of getting back to the chronology of Uji itself. After once he makes the claim that time is being and all being is time. What he does then is he looks at the self, right? How we as human beings or sentient beings understand our relationship to the world. He says the self arrays itself as the form of the entire world, and what that means is that I have this concept of me, of Adam, right? I am. It's encapsulated. It's an egoic, consciousness that centers itself inside this body, and everything that I am in relation to is an array that I use to define myself from the world, right? So there's myself, which is just the general self concept, and then there's my body, there's the outside, there's the floor, there's the wall, there's the earth, and my relation to all things in the world. And in Buddhism, they call all the phenomena that arises in the world, they call them dharmas with a small d. So dharma is all of the 10,000 things that arise in the world as objects, right? And they are juxtaposed against this subjective sense of self. So when Dogen says the self arrays itself as the form of the entire world, what he's saying is that all of these dharmas exist in relation to this self that is a center, and then these dharmas gain importance to us depending on how close they are to us. So like my car means a lot to me. I'm attached to my car. I'm attached to my wife. I'm attached to my possessions. But things that I'm not attached to, like your car or your possessions, they don't mean as much to me. So those attachments that those things that become part of me, they're important to me. And we see all of those things kind of revolving around us, and we're ourselves are the center. Dogen says that's where we are deluded. That in the core of Buddhism is that there is no intrinsic self nature. Right? That's a term called emptiness. So there's no substance to the world that exists without every other thing defining it or co-defining it, right? So everything is in interrelation with everything else, which is, another Buddhist term called interdependent origination. Everything is interdependently originated, right? There's no unique sense of self. So the idea that we center ourselves, we create this concept of self, and then define the rest of the world in relation, or we have an orientation to the rest of the world, is our first delusion. That's the first problem, and the first thing that Dogen goes after, and when he makes the bold claim that being is time, because ourselves are not separated from the world. We are interdependently arising with the world, and time is one of those constituents of existence. That if we see ourselves in time, then we are separate from it, and that again, that is that dualism, right? That Dogen is always trying to dismantle our logical minds from creating. We're always creating the dualism, and as you said when we first started, Dogen is a non-dualist. He wants to crack our minds out from the logical dualistic thinking mode and into this non-dual orientation where existence and time aren't separate entities, but they are all, it's all interdependently originated. And so that's where the self, to place the self into myriad dharmas is delusion, which is another line from Uji. And he says, but that myriad dharmas arise and confirm the self. And in this case, he means a capital S for the self. Like, so to place the self, the small self into the 10,000 things, and say that these things are apart from the self, that is delusion. But when myriad dharmas arise and illuminate the self, the capital self, which again, myself is part of that, then that is awakening. You awaken to this non-dual realization of reality as such. All right. Now, to further, is that clear so far? Am I making any sense at all? Because I know this is some very heavy, psychologically dense stuff. And I'll tell you that Dogen's writing, and even in the 13th century, is considered psychologically profound. I've seen two separate Dharma talks on Uji by these two Zen practitioners, or they're Zen monks that studied Uji for a long time and decided to make a Dharma talk out of it. And each one of them started off by saying, when they really started reading Uji, that it gave them panic attacks, because the information in Uji is so psychologically profound that if you were to really embody this idea that being is all time and time is all being, then it pushes against the boundaries of what a human being considers as acceptable, in terms of sanity, in terms of how they operate in the world, right? And so Dogen is, not only is he laying out this philosophy of time and existence and saying that it's not what we think it is, that time isn't what we think it is, and that even existence isn't what we think it is, but he's also offering a map, a guidebook on how to operationalize, how to live in a world where time is being and being is time. And that is his program of practice enlightenment, right? That is his idea that that there is a way that you can live in the world and not be bound to the clock, right? Anyway, I'll stop there for a second.
So here's where I would ask, what would you think the difference between someone like Rumi or Lao Tse would be from Dogen? Because the way it seems to be is like they all are pointing towards the same direction, right? So maybe, do you think there is a difference in Dogen's approach? Because I think you just mentioned about him not only talking about it, but laying out some steps to recognize it.
Yeah, so I was in conversation with a dear friend recently, and I said, and it didn't really dawn on me the profundity of the statement until after it exited my mouth, that all spiritual traditions are pointed to the same direction. Rumi's work is absolutely beautiful, emotionally dense and profound. But the difference between, say, Dogen and Rumi, and the difference between most spiritual teachers, is that the time component is never integrated in. It's, if you can, the present moment, right? The present moment is all that exists, right? And it's all perfect. But people look at the present moment as just the now. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so where Dogen really takes off in his own direction, this is a really good pivot point, actually. Dogen has this idea called a Dharma position. All right, and so when if we live in a non-dual reality where self and other are essentially a delusion, where there's this just one beautiful glowing, the Japanese call it one bright pearl, right? It's just one beautiful gigantic thing. That's all well and good right here in the present moment, but we still have to contend with the past and the future, right? Which is where most of society lives. They live in regret from the things they didn't do in their past, or anxiety over this future that hasn't happened yet. And the majority of human beings do not live in the present moment. And they're kind of caught in between the past and the future. So what Dogen understood implicitly is that the past, the present, and the future aren't separate substances, just like the self and other aren't separate substances. They are one temporal topology, right? Where everything is kind of interacting all together, all time, not just this present moment, but from the beginning all the way to the end. It's all happening as one large process. All right, and that's where, again, that is where Dogen differs from say a Rumi, because it's there is this, getting back to the Dharma position. Dogen says that whatever we're doing right this very second is a complete and total expression of the entire universe operating in this moment. There's a Japanese term called Zenji, right, which translates to total functioning or total exertion. And so when you're sitting in meditation, all right, you are present, but it's not just this particular moment. It is every single moment, every event that's ever existed and will ever exist is totally functioning in this present moment. You are the totality of the entire universe, of all space and all time, in this present moment. There is nothing outside of you, right? All being is time, and all time is all being. And so that radical reinterpretation of the unity of existence and time has, it means a lot for this idea of a Dharma position. And so to operationalize, to put this into practice, Dogen created his one and only practice, and it's a practice called Shikantaza. All right, Shikantaza is a Japanese term that means just sitting, but it doesn't mean like just sitting for a goal, or sitting like you're not counting your breath, you're not reciting mantra. What you are doing is just sitting. It is a single-minded concentration on the act of just sitting. And when he uses the word just, what that encapsulates is the entire universe, the entirety of existence sitting. When you get into the posture of sitting, you are already embodying the posture of the Buddha. You are embodying the mind of the Buddha. You are being completely present in this moment as the entirety, as the total functioning of the entire universe. And so for Dogen, there is no goal to attain. There is nothing outside of you to attain. Your Buddha nature is already, always, ever present. All you have to do is just sit and realize that truth, that this Dharma position that you are currently inhabiting is a complete and total expression of the entire universe. And that when you are, when you do something else, that is also a complete and total expression of the entire universe doing. This is where it gets a little scrambly. Okay, so in the idea of the Dharma position, there's no self, right? That is sitting. There's just sitting, and so when we're just sitting and we allow our body mind to drop away, like Dogen did, you are not sitting anymore. The universe is sitting you, right? And so the way that Dogen explains this is that Shikantaza isn't you yourself in meditation, because that's a dualism. It is sitting that sits sitting. It is the complete expression of the activity of this moment. And the entire universe is involved, the total exertion of the entire universe. So Dogen has a term for this, and he calls it vigorous activity. So the vigorous activity, the total exertion of the entire universe, when you are sitting, the chair, the floor, gravity, the air you breathe, the ancestors that got you here, everything is co-involved in this expression. There is such fullness to the act, to the event, and there's no boundary between you and the universe doing the thing, that you are so involved in it that there can be no separation, and it is just the act itself, right? And so Dogen says that each of these moments, each of these Dharma positions are separate snapshots of the entire universe in full expression of the moment, but that there is still a passage, like he says, every moment is complete, and if every moment is complete, how do we perceive the passage of time, right? How do we perceive the self moving forward in time? Why is there a continuity of self? And so he explains this by saying that the time being, all right, our being time, our time being has the quality of flowing, right? And so he talks about flowing, and the term that he has for this is seriatim passage. All right, and seriatim passage, or in the Japanese, is kyoryaku. All right, it's this singular counting, but in a series. So this is this idea that you have this singular snapshot, this Dharma position, this complete perfect expression, but that it's also passing in a series. But it's not a linear progression as like we think of time. It's all happening right now. Right? And the way that he explains this is he says that time doesn't move from past to future, because if time merely flies away, if time goes away, you'd be separate from time, but you are the time. And so to think about it in experiential terms, what he says is that time is flowing into itself. Every present moment is always right here. If you walk across the room and move in time, you're still here. You're walked across the room, but you are still here. And so that time isn't moving from past to future or from future to past. It's flowing into itself as itself, because and you are not separate from that thing, because self and other, as we've already established, is an illusory boundary. And so this idea of the Dharma position being a singular snapshot, but that the time flows into itself, means that being and then becoming, which is the differentiation, being is the static existence, becoming is a duration, is this differentiation. Those things are integrated as one thing. It is a static flowing, which which is why a rational mind cannot keep up with it, because either you're sitting still or you're moving. You can't be doing both. But Dogen says, yes, you can. Yeah, you can. You can sit still and be the entire movement of the universe happening. He illustrates this in Uji by saying the mountains are walking, right? So that this when we look at a mountain, we see a solid static object, right? And to our temporal brains, this thing, this mountain doesn't move, it doesn't change, it just sits still, but it's passing, right? It is always changing, it's always walking, it's always moving. And so Dogen is trying to illustrate this static movement, by saying that you have this Dharma position that's a static state, that is a complete exertion of the movement of the universe as itself, right? It's wild. It's completely wild.
Now, it kind of, that point resonates with when someone talks about the concept of Brahman in Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism, right? I do sense that the similarity in that concept, where from relativistic terms, you think that it is all separate and that it is not part of you, but in an absolute sense, it's all that there is, and it's going at the same time as you are. So I find that interesting.
Yeah.
The Hindus might also go in depth and say that you have something called Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. I believe one is Brahman without attributes and one is with attributes. So you have the formless and the form, right? So even in that absoluteness, there are layers to it. But I think Dogen would say that, I think Dogen over there would say that even if it is the absolute that does not have form or the absolute that has form, both are still in the same time that is now, right? I think he would make that point, but I believe it just backs his point further, or the other way around. It just is a complete understanding there, which is beautiful. Now, when it comes to those who are trying to, I fall in that category, although I do enjoy talking about this and reading beautiful scriptures. I can't help but fall into that issue of false recognition where, yes, intellectually I understand it's all the self, it's right now, and that there is no past or future. However, in times of stress, I fail to implement this recognition. But this is where I think I do have a point here. Dogen mentions that a pine has its own time being and a bamboo has its own. So from this statement, would that mean that we all of our souls, have our own way of achieving that recognition? Is that what he was referring to here? Does that means like this level of recognition and insight and awareness will come in its own time, depending upon one's karmas? Or am I missing the points completely? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's really interesting, that you bring up karma, because I've been trying to make the world kind, and my daily practice is loving kindness. It was kindness, and then I kind of got an upgrade to loving kindness just recently, which is really awesome. But when I move through the world, there's this idea called bodhicharya, and it's where you take every interaction and you elevate it as a practice of awakening. So whenever you're with another human being, you're allowing space, you're giving them time, you're being kind, you're being loving, and in that interaction, there's it's the total of that interaction is more than the sum of its parts. Something magical and emerges out of that. And not only do I think it's alleviating karma in a temporal sense, because what Dogen would say is everything is a result of causes and conditions, right? How we are treated as a child, our genetics, our daily experiences, all of those things come together to to array ourselves in the world. It's not just what we think about the world. It's how our actions in the world. It's how we treat other people. Some people are racist because their parents were racist, and that's just what they were taught. And so, that's their causes and conditions. Some people are shitty in traffic because, they've been treated that way. And so they just kind of keep going. But, what Dogen is saying is that if every Dharma position is a unique snapshot of the entire universe manifesting itself in every moment, then there is a freedom. There's a freedom to be completely different, to not, run the same cycles of, and so being aware of the causes and conditions of how you operate in the world and how other people operate. For me, that is the key to being a time being in the world. Because when somebody cuts me off in traffic, I now have the patience and the stance where I go, what's going on in your world that causes you to be that way? I don't take it as a personal affront, because it's not about a rigid self-other dualism anymore. It's about being in the world and wanting to treat others as an integral part of myself, this capital self. And so if you don't see people as separate from you, then compassion emerges from that kind of like naturally, because I wrote it down the other day. When you see the walls of separation vanish, then treating someone else with kindness is tantamount to your right arm scratching your left arm when it's itchy, or you soothing yourself because you're not different from that other thing. There's no othering, as Ramana Maharshi would say. How do we help others? Maharshi said there are no others, right? But recently I said, well, there's also no self, no intrinsic self that is apart from the rest of the world. We're all interoperating, interacting, and interdependently originated. So again, Dogen's point is, the way you operate in the world is a reflection of your own, of your own internal world. And so work on that, and then be good to the world, but be good to you at the same time.
Sure.
And I think that's and I wanted to say, one of the things that drew me to Dogen, and this is kind of, along the same lines, is this idea of time. We started off by saying we don't have enough time. Several philosophers that I follow in this world have this fascination with time, and they were also, even 100 years ago, seeing that human beings are plagued by this time anxiety. That as we age, the years grow shorter, and we're always in a hurry, and that hurry causes us to make foolish mistakes, or feel entitled, or always feel like we're racing against this imaginary death date, and this vanishing point, at some weird time of death. Dogen talks about that when he tackles that head on by saying, being and becoming are integrated, and so if you are just in this moment, completely present, you are in the Dharma position of life, right? You are completely alive. The entire universe. Not only is not only are you alive, but the entire universe is in the Dharma position of life. So you are in the Dharma position of life. And when you are in the Dharma position of death, the entire universe is in the Dharma position of death. And so if you are completely alive and the entire universe is in the Dharma position of life, right, with you, as total exertion as you, then you can't be dead because you are in the Dharma position of life. And psychologically, if you were able to embody that, just that idea, that you are in the Dharma position of life and that in this moment, there's nothing wrong. Like everything, the entire universe, oh God, it's just such a, you feel it, the entire universe.
Yeah.
And for me, my practice is now has kind of like gone into the direction of, I've been thinking about the universe as a benevolent being, right? This time being as benevolence. Because if there is no self and there's no other, there's only this temporal topology, this vibrant aliveness. Wouldn't it want the best for itself? Wouldn't consciousness, wouldn't it want its own, wouldn't it exist for its own benefit, And so if we run up on an other that is, different in a negative way, that's an opportunity to turn that other into a friend, and or in our own internal psychology, instead of seeing it as an enemy, you see it as a beneficial obstacle. And that is, and that term is also, you can look at it in a very Dogen-esque kind of way. This beneficial obstacle is a positive and negative, but if you look at it as through the lens of compassion and benevolence, this othering that we do, it turns into our teachers. It turns into the very fabric of practice that we need to be able to to live in and to mirror a benevolent world. And it changes us at a molecular level. It changes me. It changed me at a molecular level. I'll say that because I can't speak for others. When I started mirroring, benevolence in the world, when I started, seeing everyone in the entire world as my best friend, and in Dogen's world as a complete functioning of time, then I started moving through the world with an impeccability, with an alignment with the world. Because if reality is everything as it is completely completely perfect and cannot be completely different, that means that to accept the moment as it is the time being right now. You are, existing as that thing right now, and you're also doing it in concert with others, right? Because you're all, it's all interdependently here. Yeah, I have my good days and bad days as far as Dogen goes. I can understand and really grok what this material, and embody it, really function, like the total functioning of the universe. I can walk through my day and every single person is a reflection of me, and it's beautiful, wonderful. It's a benevolent place to be in, when I'm in tune with this capital S self, and
Definitely.
and I'm being time. There's a rhythm to it, and then on top of that, there's the capital S self. I don't know if I can get into that. there's a passage in Uji, and I really had to take a couple of days to just this one passage really get into it. And he says, impeding, impedes, impeding, and sees impeding. All right. And this is what Dogen does, man. He will scramble your brain.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, what the heck does that mean? So impeding, impedes, impeding. In Japanese, there's a Japanese word for this, but like I can't think of it. There are several definitions to the word impeding. You have impeding, you have hindering, you have encountering, and you have interconnected. All of these things mean the same thing for this one Japanese word, right? And so when Dogen says impeding, impedes, impeding, and sees impeding, he says, all right, so normally we think of ourselves and you think of a wall, all right? And you think if I am walking and I want to get, there's a wall, and that wall, it impedes me, right? It stops my progress. But this is thinking that there's a self in a wall, something that could possibly impede. And so when Dogen says impeding, impedes, impeding, what he means is that that when we see reality in its proper context as the time being, then we understand that there's no self and there's no wall. And so it is only our own relationship to the impeding that impedes itself. And so when he says impeding, impedes, impeding, that is the construction of reality. That is what it's doing, right? And he says, and then sees impeding, right? Impeding, impedes, impeding, and sees impeding, which means it sees itself. And this is the takeaway sentence for Dogen, because what he's implying there is that reality, existence, right, is not this inert thing. It's not a container that we're in. We've been talking this whole time about how existence is time and we are that thing. What he's saying is that when impeding sees itself, it becomes that is the universe, existence, becoming self-aware of this situation, right? And that for Dogen, that is how a human being liberates. That is how a human being gets knocked out of this self-centered orientation and sees that and understands that we are an interoperation, right? There's just the interaction, the event that's happening, and there's no self and other. Is just this thing in its perfection. And so I have been having this, this idea of limiting or limitation for several months now. I was walking on a trail. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh, we're good. We're 15 minutes in, but feel free to continue.
I was walking on the trail one day, and I was thinking, I was expansive and in this process oriented mode where I wasn't the small thing. I was operating from the whole, the global view, right? And I thought about the idea of limitation. And anyway, the phrase was, limit me, fuck you. All right. There's because if you limit what you can possibly be, then you're not allowing the entire universe to exert. You're not you're not being who you truly are, that self with the capital S. And so this idea of limitation has kind of hung out, that there's nothing that the only thing that limits me is me. Right. And however I feel about the world, that is my own orientation to the world. Right. That's me othering. And so this idea of limitation is problematic. So I took this idea of impeding, impedes, impeding, just to get back to that, and sees impeding. And I said, what if I replaced it with the word limiting? And so I use a lot of AI, right, to help me get through these very, very difficult, you know, twisty concepts. And so I said, hey, all right, you know, I know this is not the direct translation of the word impeding, but can you say limiting? And I popped it in there, and it says, well, for Dogen, this would create the phrase limiting, limits, limiting, and sees limiting. And AI says you've hit on something really profound here, because the way that Dogen is using this idea of impeding, hindering, or limiting is as follows. When we limit ourselves, if we think about a limitation, we can think about it as a boundary, right? The limits to J would be this corporeal self, right? Think about a coffee cup, right? A coffee cup has a definite boundary, right? If a coffee cup didn't have a limitation, if it didn't have a limit to itself, right? Something that would define it from everything else, then it would not be able to hold coffee. It wouldn't be able to function as a coffee cup, right? It would, if it didn't have a boundary and you put it on the table, it would be no different than the table or the air or anything else. The only way that we are able to perceive reality as this differentiation is because reality limits itself, right? It limits itself, but that's not a negative thing in this case. What Dogen's saying is that he uses the example of a mountain and sky. A mountain limits the sky, because where the mountain ends, the sky begins. And where the sky ends, the mountain begins. And so these two things limit each other. But what he's saying is that the point where things touch, the point where things touch, where the sky meets the mountain, that's where the action's happening. That's the limitation sees itself. And the only way that the mountain knows the sky is through its own differentiation, through where these things touch. He also has the example of, when we pick up a rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
The softness of our hand meets the cold hardness of the rock, and in that is where experience happens. And so this limitation is where is the ground of all experience. It's the ground of thusness itself, which is the fullness of reality. This idea that the world, the existence, because Dogen uses the word the earth or the world because that was where their cosmology was at the time in the 13th century. This is what they had, the earth. But what he really means is existence and all the whole bit, right? To have anything to experience itself, it has to meet. It has the limits have to meet each other so that they can provide an experience of reality itself. And we experience things through that connection, through those limitations. And again, so when limiting, right? When we have that interaction, the limiting sees itself in the process, and then that liberates ourselves from. We see that the mountain and the sky exist, but that we also exist. We also, when we're seeing a mountain in the sky, we're also providing that limit where all of these things coexist in this very, very precise, just so kind of state. And I think that is a beautiful and poetic way to view the universe, to view our existence not as separate billiard balls knocking around, but as this continuous, flowing, fluid existence where time and being are just it is a flowing fluid, but it's its own. Each moment is a separate static thing. It's complete and whole in itself. It's a singular state that is all encompassing at the same time. It is one and the many are integrated together. And when I told you I wanted to do this series on time and consciousness, my goal was to bring forth an understanding of integral consciousness. And I know we talked about that in the Nietzsche podcast about this
A
idea
little
of
bit.
integral consciousness. But for me, the way that I interpret Dogen Zenji in the 13th century, I think that Dogen was an integral thinker, and that the entire enterprise of the Shobogenzo and especially Uji was Dogen's attempt to use his language at that time to talk about what an integrated universe looks like and how that operates on the ground, right? So the idea of integrated being in time, you can think of it as a unity, or we can also think of it as an integration, which, if you're looking at being as one part and time as one part, those things integrate together as a whole unit. I look at the idea of Buddhist emptiness, being without substance, being without essential nature. To me, that says that instead of having these billiard ball parts, all these little tiny pieces, you can view reality as a fluid process, as something that is dynamic, flowing, interoperable, and just together, seamless, but with enough differentiation that we can appreciate the quality, the beauty, the magnificence of it, right? Like you look out, you see the myriad forms, you see the 10,000 things, and then you also sit and go, wow, that's me, bro. That I'm not separate
Right.
from that thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not the ego saying I am that. It's saying, no, this is, right? This is the quality of being in its own becoming. And for Dogen, that is what practice enlightenment means. It means that the practice of becoming enlightened is no different than enlightenment itself. You are enlightened right now, but the you that thinks you're enlightened isn't the thing. It is, enlightenment is. And all we have to do is just rest in that. It's always ever present. I think it'd be fitting to kind of to end this discussion of Uji by going back to the very beginning of Uji and talking about the couplets, the 4 couplets. For the time being.
What are the couplets?
For the time being, stand on the peak of the highest mountain. For the time being, walk across the deepest ocean. For the time being, 3 heads and 8 arms, demon. For the time being, an 8-foot or 16-foot golden body. Right? So this is how Dogen begins Uji, right? Saying, for the time being, stand at the highest peak. And what he means by this is that the self at the highest peak is this crystal clear moment of realization. This is your enlightenment, right? This is the self arrayed, all of the dharmas arrayed, and you are just that thing standing at the highest peak, right? For the time being, walk across the bottom of the deepest ocean. For Dogen, that is the depths and the chaos and the darkness of life. That is delusion at its finest, right? That is the muck of life. For the time being, 3 heads and 8 arms. This is our chaotic movement through life. This is our anger. This is our frustration. This is our hurriedness. It's not been interpreted, but when I hear 3 heads and 8 arms, uh, the three-headed, eight-armed demon. They call this the Asura in Buddhism. For me, that demon represents the three heads or the three faces of time, the past, present, future, and the eight arms are the eight directions of of space. And so this the idea of this demon is that this is how we are present in space and time, and how we suffer in space and time as a result of our separation. Right. This is how human beings are taught in space and time. And then it says, for the time being, an 8-foot or 16-foot golden body of the Buddha. In some Buddhist interpretations, an 8-foot Buddha is a Buddha sitting in meditation. This is they're 8 feet tall because of a Buddha is this larger than life figure, and so a Buddha in meditation is 8 foot tall. And then if a Buddha is standing or lying, then the entire body is stretched out as a 16-foot golden body, right? So that is so what these four couplets say all day long is that whether we are enlightened at the highest peak, the self realizes, the dharmas are arrayed, or whether we are in delusion, on the bottom of the ocean, stuck in it as a demon, or as in moments of enlightenment. The time being is right here, right now. It is all absolutely perfect. So whether we know it or not, whether we're deluded and thinking that we're this separate cut off thing, we're angry and all of these things, or whether we are enlightened, as this Buddha, it's all the same thing. There's no separation between delusion and enlightenment. It's all right here, right now, and ever present, right? And so that is kind of like the cornerstone of what Dogen's getting at, is that no matter what you're doing, the truth of the moment is right in front of you. You are absolutely perfect, perfectly thus in this moment, and and all being at all time are exerting. The universe is doing you. You're not doing what you think you're doing. You are a completely beautifully choreographed puzzle piece that limits everything else to be able to experience life as the vast fullness that it is, right? And
Yes.
so rest in that. Rest
Beautiful.
in that beautiful sentiment, that for Dogen is a reality. It's not just a poetic sentiment. This is how reality is actually operating. This is what you experience when body and mind drops away, because your body and mind drops away, but the body and mind of everything else drops away too. And so you're just in this fielding and you're being.
Yeah, that's a nice way to end it. You are being. Well, this was wonderful, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time and beautifully expressing the works of Dogen in this podcast. Well, this is a 4-part series of consciousness that we are doing here, although I am pretty confident that it's going to be more than just 4 parts at some point.
Yeah.
But yes, it's been quite the honor to have you here for today's episode. Hopefully people have benefited a lot from this. We did touch upon most of it was Dogen, but we did touch a little bit upon from the Advaita Vedanta side of things and how we can practically implement this in the moments of frustration, whether or not you're in the traffic or you might be having some obstacles in your life. But we also talked about how obstacle kind of becomes the way, which is closer to the Stoics' perspective too. So it's beautiful to see how everything, the interconnectedness part of it, is applicable here from a philosophical standpoint of different worlds of philosophies merging together in the same time of being. But with that said, thank you so much, and I will be seeing you in the next episode.
Absolutely, Jay. I appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you.